Given that the government has announced a temporary 3-year pause to the federal carbon tax on home heating oil, the House called on the government to extend that pause to all forms of home heating. This is a reasonable, common sense, and fair-minded motion. Allow me to read it again, Madam Speaker. Given that the government has announced a temporary 3-year pause to the federal carbon tax on home heating oil, the House called on the government to extend that pause to all forms of home heating. That is what we're asking for today and with the vote on Monday. The Prime Minister gave to some. Now, he needs to give to all. Poll after poll has shown that the affordability crisis aided by this government's poor fiscal mismanagement is at the top of minds for all Canadians. Conversations that I'm having with the people of Hastings-Lennox and Addington are consistent. High price of food, fuel, rent, and interest on mortgages are staggering. We realize that the relief from cost of living is what Canadians not only want, but they need, Madam Speaker. And the quickest and most effective way to do that is to roll back their burdensome carbon tax plan that is closer to a revenue-raising measure than an actual carbon reduction plan. And when I say that scrapping the Liberal carbon tax will have immediate positive results for struggling Canadians, I don't say that without backing. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem himself told parliamentarians that removing the carbon tax would result in an immediate drop in inflation, helping ease the financial burden weighing down Canadian families. The Conservative opposition has tried numerous times through Opposition Day motions to stem the increasing tide of affordability crises in this place. And every time, this Liberal NDP government has voted against it. September 28, 2023, motion to introduce legislation to repeal the carbon tax. The government voted against it. June 1st, motion to cancel the second carbon tax. This government voted against it. December 8th of 2022, motion to eliminate the carbon tax on food. This government voted against it. It is extremely clear to anyone that has been paying attention that this government has historically had a deep loathing to alter their carbon scheme in any way. So suffice to say that when the Prime Minister announces a temporary 3-year pause to the federal carbon tax on home heating oil, many of us thought, why now? Why has this government taken this small step in the right direction after literal years of dogged ideological refusal to support common sense motions proposed by the official opposition? The answer can be found splashed across the newspapers of the nation. But allow me to cite everyone's favorite pollster, Mr. Fournier. If there was an election held today, according to 338, this Liberal Party under this Prime Minister would win a staggering 80 seats. 1 out of every 2 sitting members of that government would not be coming back. The only reason that this government is starting to break away from their near cult-like devotion to this Prime Minister's carbon tax is because it is now politically expedient to do so. They are doing it now because they know, and they always knew, it was what Canadians wanted. It was what Canadians needed. But Canadians had a problem because it was not what their Prime Minister wanted until now. With what I am sure was much gnashing of teeth at the cabinet table, their free falls in the polls has forced them to make a political calculus, abandon their deeply unpopular urban-centered climate change policy in exchange for at least some public support come election time, particularly in Liberal sea-rich Atlantic Canada, where the majority of heating oil is used. I'd like to applaud the Atlantic Liberal caucus for what I'm sure was a spirited effort to secure even this small concession from the leadership. And I find it curious why those same concessions were not given to other areas heated by different methods. For instance, Madam Speaker, why did the Prime Minister fail to include electric heating from these measures, which is the most popular source of heating in British Columbia, where Mr. Fournier predicts only 4 of 11 of his caucus will return? Or natural gas for Ontarians, where only 30 are slated to see the 45th Parliament. But I have good news for my colleagues, Liberal colleagues across the way. the member from Carleton just tabled a motion that would help directly the other 97% of those Canadians that are struggling to pay their heating bills, like those using propane, natural gas, electric, wood stoves, which are especially frequent in rural communities. Now, this is not to say that a federal government does not have a role to play in combating climate change, and that industry and Canadians should do their very best to lower their carbon emissions. The federal government absolutely has a role to play as measured environmental stewards. It's simply stating that having the government take the wallets of Canadians hostage to do this is a terrible way to go about it, Madam Speaker. Once again, Tiff Macklem reiterated that the carbon tax disproportionately hurts the lower class, the poor, the infirm, those on social assistance, because they just cannot undertake the extreme lifestyle changes necessary to have any measurable effect. Not everyone is an investment banker or a lobbyist. The vast majority of Canadians are struggling, and this Liberal NDP government needs to open up their eyes and realize this, Madam Speaker.
Hear, hear.
I'd like to take an opportunity to quickly highlight another time-tested and true Liberal Party method of raising money that this government has borrowed from their Chrétien-era ancestors, raiding and pillaging from the budget and pockets of the Canadian Armed Forces. At a time when our CAF members are using food banks and begging for donations to pay rent, result in morale, recruitment, and retention dipping to an all-time low, what does this government do? Slash their benefits and cut $1 billion from the defense budget, something they specifically said they would not do in the 2023 budget, and this doesn't even touch the billions of lapsed spending that this Parliament approved, but was never used on the CAF, but rather skimmed off onto some other project. It's shameful, Madam Speaker, and it is the exact opposite of what needs to be done to address the numerous severe crises facing our armed forces. Madam Speaker, my riding is immense, stretching from Amherst Island, where Lake Ontario meets the St. Lawrence River, along the shores of Bay Quinte to Belleville, and northward to the Hastings Highlands at the edge of Algonquin Park. Whenever I get a chance, I love to travel through the riding to meet the awesome and amazing people that we have there. During my conversations with my constituents, what I, as I'm sure many others in this place, find is that despite inflation, despite high taxes, and despite rising interest rates, our people are resilient and determined to carry forward and make it better lives for themselves and for their family. But it's getting harder. Whether it's at the local fairs or celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Lennox and Addington County General Hospital Volunteer Auxiliary, it is our people, Madam Speaker, who make us strong. We cannot lose sight that it is these people that sent us here to do our jobs. It is our role to advocate for them. My constituents are overwhelmingly hardworking farmers, forestry workers, tradesmen, seniors, small business owners, and young families juggling the chaos of life. They pay their federal taxes, they pay their provincial taxes, and their municipal and their education taxes. But after 8 years, they need a break from a government and a finance minister who believes big bureaucracy can spend us into prosperity using their hard tax dollars. After 8 years, they need a break from a prime minister who thinks he deserves over $600,000 for 3 vacations on the backs of taxpayers. Madam Speaker, after 8 years, they need a break from this free-spending finance minister and her jet-setting boss who travel around the world preaching virtues and values which he and his government fail to uphold. Madam Speaker, all the members opposite find it in their hearts to rein in the runaway spending of their leadership and give my constituents, their constituents, all Canadians, Madam Speaker, a break. If not, will they please step aside and let a common sense conservative government show them how to balance a budget, tackle climate change, and still deliver effectively and efficiently to Canadians who so desperately need them to.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Well said.